to cover every detail. At any rate, remember primary colors, Mondrian. I'm giving away the extra credit here, so if you do listen to this, then you will have that advantage. This is another artist. This is Mark Rothko. And there's two of these, right? So we talked about primary colors and hard lines. Rothko's a bit later. He's one of the big abstract expressionists that really dial up abstraction in the 20th century. He's one of the big deal painters of that time. Pollock is another one you know probably from the drip paintings. At any rate, he's using analogous colors here for the most part. The purple's a little bit complementary here with the orangey yellow. But the red and the orange and the various shadings in here are mostly analogous. So he's just using color, and these are the artists I want to show you that are just using color. Mondrian, I mean, I guess you could argue that he's using line as well, but it's really a stricter color theory with these particular artists. Another beautiful analogous piece from Rothko, Fields of Color. This is also called color field painting, which he sort of invented or, developed, and other artists became color field artists after him, one of which is Helen Frankenthaler. And she takes this to another level of these sort of liquidy, watered down acrylic paint washes. So she adds a lot of water to her acrylic paint and she just rolls the canvas around and they get a little softer. So just to recap on the art technique here, Mondrian, very hard edges. Rothko, softer edges, and then she goes super soft and like the edges are very blurred. I mean, there's some harder edge here, but it's quite soft. Color field painting, just color. That's all that she's expressing. There's not even brush strokes here, like there were with Rothko, because she's not using a brush. Another color field painting by Helen Frankenthaler. This one almost gets sort of landscapey, or almost like there's like a volcano, I think, in the sea, and there's a wee bit of land, but that's not what she's doing. She's just, it's not representational, it's just color. She's just investigating color. Okay, so there's a fun one for you. You can do this in the book because I probably won't give you enough time here. You're supposed to look at this red and green square for, I believe, a minute. It doesn't give you in the book, but just give it for a little while, and then you look at the blank square, and it will flip, so you'll see green in the middle and red on the outside. Simultaneous contrast is also called after image. It's how your eye works. So that simultaneous contrast is one way that your eye does things. Another thing is that your eye does optical color mixture. Pointillism is kind of using optical color mixture to make the illusion of the mixing of the colors. And I'll show you this piece. So George Seurat, he really is the only person who did this. I think a few others tried it, but the amount of dots that it takes to cover this painting, and then if you look at this frame, he did that as well. Quite labor intensive, quite difficult to do. He's giving us a very impressionistic scene. He was initially one of the impressionists, and he broke out with his own subgenre called pointillism. And so he's assuming, much like we would look later, computer is not invented here, later at computer screens or TV screens, about how pixels make an image. Also, I would say earlier technological reference would be the newspaper. The newspaper made up a bunch of different sized dots, black and white to make gray that had less whiteness or blackness. But anyway, it was made up of dots, and that would give us an image. This is giving us paint colors next to each other, and that way we sort of mix the colors with our eyes. It's getting mixed in our heads. Part of the reason we love Impressionism and Pointillism so much is because we are participating in these paintings. We are not given all the information in photographic detail. We're interpreting a lot of it in our brain, so we literally are engaged in the process of observing this piece. Much like Picasso, when the photograph became the way that portraits were done, because it could be done very realistically. The Impressionists are reacting, and the Impressionists are before Picasso, of course, but the Impressionists are reacting to this invention as well and finding that they no longer need to do a hyper realistic hard edge painting. They can do something a little more expressionistic, or in this case, we call it impressionistic. There's an expressionist, those are slightly different. It doesn't really have to do with that word as much as that's just what they were called. But they're reacting to the photograph. But back to the point of color mixing. So there's all these colors in there together making up a gray. So there's purples and there's browns in there, and our eye is making sort of a grayish blue cloud. If that makes sense. This one's another one with optical color mixing. Really interesting piece with pieces of thread. Again, this is how newspapers are somewhat done, not with spools of thread, but with chunks of pixels or segments of color or black and white, either way. Color affects us on a basic level. We have emotional responses to it, culturally conditioned, and they're also personal. Color can elicit different emotional responses from a work of art. The scream, we see the sky here that has a very emotional effect on us, this crazy sky. Edvard Munch said that this was somewhat realistic, and at the time when this was painted, I believe, and I'd have to double check the history on this, but the volcanic eruption of Krakatoa was still affecting the sky, and they were having these dramatic, the sky around the entire world, which is wild to think about. But anyway, the volcanic eruption in southern hemisphere was affecting the European sunsets, and they were quite dramatic. But a lot of the emotional content here is from the color. Of course, it's from the drawing as well, but we see quite a bit of disturbing, stressful. Bright colors tend to be more hot emotionally, and then cool, of course, are calming.